I'm Stuart Eimer. I'm a professor of sociology here at Widener University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight for the keynote address during our week of events to commemorate the legacy of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Now, a week like this was not easy to pull together. I was actually surprised at how much work it took, and I want to take a moment to thank Rachel Batch from the History Department and Kit Healy, who's in the back from the Psychology Department, for helping to pull this together, putting in a lot of time and effort. I also want to thank Allison Roberts from the Public Relations Department for publicizing the event, and Noreen Bueller from the Psychology Department, who also publicized the event. There were also a lot of people who contributed resources to make this week possible, and I want to just recognize them, because otherwise none of this would have happened. We were given contributions from a wide range of people across the university, including the Academic Service Learning Faculty Development Program, the College of Arts and Sciences, the Gender and Women's Studies Program, the Women Histories Month Subcommittee, the Diversity Advisory Committee, the Humanities Division, the Social Sciences Division, the Office of Community Engagement. Marcine is in the back, I think, I see her, and the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. So thank you all for your support in making this possible. So if you were to ask the organizers of this week why they got involved in a project to commemorate the Triangle Fire, I think you'd get a variety of responses. We're psychologists, historians, sociologists. For me, one of the main motivations was to provide an opportunity to explore how the world that we now live in, the one which we take for granted, has been shaped by events and struggles from the past. And take but one example, the 40-hour work week and the weekend. Today, most people don't think twice about working hours. You guys are just going to hopefully go get jobs and expect that you'll work 8 hours or so and that you'll have 2 days off the weekend. And it wasn't that long ago when my grandparents entered the workforce, when the girls in the Triangle Factory were working, that it was common for people to work 6 or 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. I want you to think about that, 6 or 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. Now, employers didn't change these practices out of kindness or because they felt bad. They changed these practices because workers organized and demanded shorter hours. People organized for decades in New York and Chicago and San Francisco and Philadelphia, and they struggled to force employers to shorten the workday. The girls of the Triangle Factory had struck for, among other things, shorter hours and union recognition just 2 years before the fire. And had Triangle agreed to unionize, it's possible the fire would have been avoided, that safety would have been approved, or that workers wouldn't have been at work on that Saturday afternoon when the fire actually occurred. Now, none of the 146 who perished in the fire lived long enough to enjoy an 8-hour day or a weekend. But their unfortunate deaths helped spark a movement that would change America forever, would bring us the country that we all now take for granted. On the 50th anniversary of the fire, David Dubinsky, who was the president of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, put it this way: "We gather here now to pay homage to the memory of the 146 who died here in flames, leaping from the windows, crashing through the sidewalks, screaming to death beyond the locked doors. These were our martyrs, because what we couldn't accomplish by reasoning with the bosses, by pleading with the bosses, by arguing with the bosses, they accomplished with their deaths. The horror of this tragedy so shocked the city and the state and the whole nation that on all sides there were suddenly protests and cries for reforms and demands for new laws." Now, over time, these protests and demands would bring about the New Deal and the Fair Labor Standard Act, which made the 40-hour week the law of the land. Now, you spend a little time studying, which you should do here in college. You study the end of child labor, the minimum wage laws, unemployment insurance, workplace safety rules, and countless other subjects, and you'll find that we have these things because those who came before us organized and demanded them. Right? Those who came before us looked out at the world, knew it could be changed, and they changed it. Now, for me, that's one of the lessons of the fire, that out of the ashes of the tragedy came a movement of ordinary people who succeeded in transforming America. And that brings me to today's speakers, because most of the political and economic gains that we've accomplished in this country have yet to be made in much of the world. And more than anyone that I'm personally aware of, Charlie Kernaghan has worked tirelessly to draw attention to the situation of workers around the world. Kernaghan is the director of the Institute for Global Labor and Human Rights, which was formerly known as the National Labor Committee, and he's widely recognized as the founder and leading voice of the anti-sweatshop movement in the United States. For over 20 years, Charlie and the small staff of the NLC have made it their life's work to promote and defend worker rights in the global economy. They've traveled to Central America, China, Bangladesh, India, Jordan, and other developing countries and spoke with thousands of workers from hundreds of workplaces. The NLC has produced a steady stream of in-depth reports. Some of you have seen some of the videos they produced over the last couple of weeks in your classes. These reports have exposed corporate misconduct, miserable and abusive sweatshop conditions, grueling hours, starvation wages, which trap tens of millions of poor people in the developing world in poverty. They work long hours making the goods that we buy, that most of us are wearing right now. Kernaghan is perhaps best known as the man who made Kathy Lee cry. I don't know if many of you are old enough to remember this. I remember it distinctly. He exposed the factory in Honduras where child workers were being abused while selling clothes for Kathy Lee Gifford's line of clothing at Walmart. The NLC has taken on some of the largest multinationals in the world, including Walmart, Nike, Disney, Gap, Alcoa, Victoria's Secret, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NFL. And this is the important thing, they've won significant and concrete improvements for tens of thousands of workers. The NLC's work has drawn enormous media attention, which has been critical to helping the anti-sweatshop movement survive and grow. We'll be having a speaker specifically about that tomorrow, which I invite you all to come to. And it's been critical for workers around the world struggling for their rights. In 2006, the NLC's expose of human trafficking and forced labor in Jordanian apparel factories producing for the U.S. and Europe was covered in the New York Times and led to congressional hearings. The NLC has detailed undercover investigations of factories in China where teenagers and sometimes even kids are paid pennies an hour to make products for Christmas ornaments, toys, crucifixes, webcams, computers for our mics, mice for our computers, and a wide variety of things. And this has all been covered very widely. Kernaghan is also frequently invited to testify on sweatshop issues for both the Senate and the House, and has consulted with many members of Congress. He just told me a very funny story about getting a call from Secretary of Labor Robert Reich. He knows that the world can be changed and has spent his life devoted to changing it. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Charlie Kernaghan.
Thank you. That was a terrific introduction. Thank you. It's the best one I've had. Usually, we're not always amongst people who care. Well, this is not going to be a lecture. This is going to be storytelling. This is, so it shouldn't be too difficult. But I don't intend to speak on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. I intend to talk about what's going on today in the global economy. But I want to mention one or two things about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. And I know you've studied this, and this has been the center of this week of events. On March 25th in 1911, at 4:40 on a Saturday afternoon is when the fire broke out at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City, right by New York University, in the Ash Building. And when the women smelt the smoke, they didn't panic. They started to walk towards the cloakroom to get their jackets, what they called the cloakroom back then, to get their jackets, and they were just going to leave. They weren't panicking. But all of a sudden, the flames hit the floor. The factory is located on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor of the Ash Building. And the flames hit the wooden floor, and then they hit the oil rags that were kept underneath the sewing machines. And all of a sudden, it was an inferno. They were in an inferno. They couldn't see. There was smoke, heat. This was a fire that was raging out of control. At which point, they ran to the exits to get out. But the exit door was locked. And when the police found their bodies after the fire, they actually found the women's fingernails because they were clawing at the door to open it. And their fingernails were being torn off. They were fighting for their lives. At the same time, When they realized they were trapped, you see the fire department then, the hook and ladders didn't go up above 7 stories, but the workers were in the 8th, 9th, and 10th story. So they were helpless. They were stuck in this inferno. And some of the workers said that they want their families to have their bodies. They don't want to be burnt to a crisp. And there was this extraordinary scene where a man, and you have to see these buildings. It has the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, the Ash building now, it's still there. It's a building owned by NYU now. They have these huge windowsills. I mean, literally like 2 foot wide and just massive. And there was this image that people were on the ground were watching. A man got out on a garment worker got out on the ledge, and he was lifting up the young women and putting them on the ledge, and then he was leaning out and dropping them, because these workers wanted their families to have their bodies at least to bury, and to know who died, because they knew they would be incinerated. And he did this with 3 women. The 4th woman must have been his wife or his girlfriend. They got out, they actually embraced, and he kissed her on the ledge and dropped her. And her skirt was on fire as she went to the ground, and then he jumped. And people watching this. There was a 13-year-old kid hanging on the windowsill, hanging by her fingertips, and eventually had to fall. She couldn't do it any longer. And of course, 146 people were killed, and the streets ran in blood. And that fire galvanized New York and galvanized the country, like was explained. Thousands of people went to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. They surrounded the building. They couldn't, it was so horrific. When they buried those women, 100,000 people marched in the funeral procession. 400,000 people lined the sidewalks. And the cry was, who is going to defend the working girl? And unions came together with civic groups, came together with students, came together with wealthy people, came together with middle-class people. And a movement was created. And within 2 months, they set up the Factory Investigation Committee. Took 2 months. It had unprecedented subpoena power. In 2 months after they were organized, they had investigated 2,000 factories in New York State. 2,000 factories. What we'd consider almost overnight, they changed the laws that fire escapes could no longer be locked. Fire escapes had to open out the way. You had to have sprinkler systems in the buildings. There had to be fire drills. They changed how the Labor Department was structured. Unbelievable. Within 2 months, these changes were being made. And that led to the New Deal. That led to the, unemployment compensation in many ways. That led to the minimum wage. That led to time and a half. That led to the right to organize, the Fair Labor Standards Act. That led to the 40-hour work week, and just on and on. So those workers didn't die in vain. But what's happening today, we're going to show you an image in a little video clip in half a second. Today, 97% of the garments are made offshore. At least. It could be 98%, 99% by now. But the garment industry has essentially been wiped out across the United States. So in Bangladesh, in a factory called Hamin, on December 14th, just on December 14th, 2010, just 3 months short of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Okay, so essentially 100 years after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, the exact same thing is happening in the global economy. They were locked in the factory. The exit doors were locked. The fire started on the 9th floor, and the hook and ladder trucks in Bangladesh don't go above the 7th floor. The exact same, word for word, you could hear from their families. The workers told each other, those images you saw falling, those were workers jumping from the top of the building. In the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, the people on the ground said, bales of clothing are falling from the building. But it wasn't. The workers were jumping off the building. The workers were jumping off the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory building so their parents would have their bodies and they wouldn't be burnt to a crisp. Those weren't bales of clothing falling, those were human beings. 29 workers were killed in this fire and 36 wounded. The only reason thousands and thousands weren't killed was because it was lunch hour and the factory was empty. It was only the people who lived too far away to go home for lunch that they were up in the cafeteria on the 11th floor. If this fire had broken out when everybody was in the building, hundreds, if not thousands of people would have been killed. In other words, we've gone backwards in the global economy. From the struggle of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire to all of the changes made in the United States and to the legislation and to the social movement, we are now back to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. All of those improvements have been wiped out. Those workers worked from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock. So they worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. They got 1 day off. 1 day. You know what they're paid? 21 cents an hour. You know who they're producing for? Gap. Gap and J.C. Penney. And we also believe Target and Abercrombie and Finch. In the Triangle factory in New York City 100 years ago, the workers got 14 cents an hour wages. You know what 14 cents an hour is in today's wages? And don't forget, we're talking about 1911. If you do the inflation rate, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us that 14 cents an hour at the Lower East Side of Manhattan was worth $3.18 an hour. So the real wage in today's dollars of 2011, the real wage in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was $3.18 an hour. In Bangladesh, it's 21 cents an hour. We've gone backwards, not forward, we're going backwards. The workers in Bangladesh are making less than the workers did at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. In the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, there was this outrage. People wouldn't leave the building. People marched in the funeral procession. People wrote about it. 400,000 people lined the funeral procession. 100,000 people marched in it. The United States was changed because of those tragic deaths of those 146, mostly young women. What happens today? The workers get burnt. The workers get, they jump from the building to save their bodies so their parents could have it. Exit doors are locked. In other words, we've gone backwards and they earn 21 cents an hour. Let's watch one more clip. This is very brief, of another factory fire in 2000 in Bangladesh called the Chowdhury Knitwear Fire. In 2000, a fire breaks out at 7 o'clock at night in the Chowdhury garment factory. This was outside of Dhaka. And the fire hits the generator. The electricity goes off, and they're plunged into pitch darkness. There was no fire equipment, there was no safety equipment, there were no fire drills, there was no alarms. The workers started to run, and they had locked the workers in, metal gates. "46 workers were killed in that fire, including 12 and 13 and 14-year-old girls. They were making garments for institutions in the United States. More than 90 years after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City, they're having the exact same thing repeat itself in Bangladesh. What we're seeing now is a return to 1911. So, not much has changed. And in that factory fire in the Chowdhury Knitwear Factory outside of Dhaka, three of the workers who were killed were 10 years old, 10, 11, and 12. Other workers were just 14 years of age, killed. And we don't hear about these things. We wear the clothing that they make. In fact, like I said, in the Hameen factory fire, the one before this, 400,000 pairs of Gap children's denim shorts were burnt in the factory. 400,000 pairs. That's the size of these factories. 400,000 pairs for one label. Children's denim shorts. But there's no outrage. We just go on with our lives. And of course, what's out of sight is out of mind. We don't even know what's going on. Now, I'm so, for me, like coming to a place like Widener is a really special event. I take it really seriously, and I love it more than anything else. And I'll tell you why. Students, you may not think that you have power, but you do. And the companies are afraid of you. I'm too old. They don't care about me because I'm set in my ways and I'm not going to go out and buy a lot of stuff. Corporations look at you and you are their target. You have a great big X on your back because the corporations want to brand you. They want you to be branded so that for the rest of your life, you will buy their brand, whether it's Nike or Adidas or Reebok or whatever it is, or Gap. They have to get you when you're young. And once they got you branded, Nike sneakers or whatever it is, then they have you. Their fight is to get you as a loyal consumer for the rest of your life. That's what they want. That's the whole game plan. That's the advertising. That you're the target audience. They don't care, again, they don't care about older people. They want you. And I've gone in to meet with major executives of the apparel companies, and I always try to play games with them a little bit. And I said to one of the big apparel companies, actually it was Liz Claiborne, I said, the students really aren't very strong. And the vice president said, oh no, they're very strong. And then she caught herself and pulled back a little bit. In other words, as students, you have enormous power. And these workers in these factories are your age, or they're younger. They're just not in a great school like this. They're not getting educated. They don't have a future. They're in these factories. So don't think that you don't have power. And I want to give one example of the distance between what's happening in the United States or what's happening in a place like Bangladesh or any other country in the developing world. Do you know how long it would take a garment worker in Bangladesh? How long that person would have to work in order to pay to go to college here? The worker in Bangladesh, the garment worker, earning 21 cents an hour, would have to work for 97 years to be able to go to Widener for 1 year. And that's only if she didn't eat in that 97 years, or buy clothing in those 97 years, or rent an apartment in those 97 years. In other words, the gap has become so huge that we're just leaving everyone behind, like we're disassociated from what's going on in our global economy. Because almost everything now, is made in the global economy, particularly the garments. And in some ways, the workers in Bangladesh or China or any place, let me just go, one quick thing. We buy sporting goods and toys year after year after year, especially during the holidays, obviously. We buy $27 billion worth of toys and sporting goods. It's more than that now. All of those goods are made in China, probably 98% of them again. Toys and sporting goods made in China. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever met one of the Chinese women who make those products? Ever? Even once? Even one woman in the last 10 years? Has anybody? And all of us buy the sporting goods. We love it. It's fun. It's healthy. Why is it that we buy goods from all over the world, year after year after year, $27 billion worth of sporting goods and toys, but we have not met even one worker who's made those products? Now, that isn't a mistake. That's not an oversight. In other words, that is planned. In other words, they want to keep us stupid. They want to keep us isolated. They want to make sure we have no bonds with people around the world. They want to make sure that we just be quiet and we pay attention to the label and we buy the goods. We're not allowed to know who makes these goods. They don't allow it. So the point I'm trying to get to is that it doesn't have to be this way. And Don't ever underestimate your power. There are 16 million college students in the United States. There's another 56 million students in elementary school and high school. That's 72 million students. You're 1/4 of the population of the United States, about 307 million. Hey, you have power, enormous power. If you exercise this power, you change the society. You change the world. You have the power. Now, it's not for everyone, but a handful of people within this university can make a huge difference. Students, professors. That's just my plea. And I want to now just put a human face on some of this global economy, and I'm going to stick with Bangladesh mostly just because it makes it more, just flows more easily. I want you to see a picture of Halima. Now, Halima works within a factory called Harvest Rich. She made underwear for Hanes, this very underwear. Hanes is the best known label in the United States, the most widely recognized. This pair of underwear made in Bangladesh, and it was sold at Walmart. So you have the best known label in the world, in the United States, Hanes, most recognized label, for the largest retailer on the face of the earth. They make this underwear. Halima, you know what her job was? She's what they call a cleaner. All garments are sewn inside out. So when the garment is being sewn, it's sewn inside out. And they have helpers with little pairs of scissors, and they're cleaners, they're called. And what they do with the scissors is snip off the loose threads, because threads are left loose throughout the garment. She had a production goal. She had to do about 150 pairs of these things, 130 pairs of these things an hour, one every 24 seconds. She had to clean a pair of underwear every 24 seconds. And she stood at a tall table because they wouldn't let them sit down, and she used her scissors to clean it. And she said to us, when I fall behind my production goal, if I don't meet that 100, if I don't do one every 24 seconds, if I fall behind the production goal, my supervisor, a man much bigger than she is, slaps her face very hard, violently, jerking it back and forth. Halima's 11 years old, making clothing for Hanes and for Walmart. She's 11 years old. And they slap her face, and she said to us, it happens every single day. You fall behind the goal, they slap you. They curse at her, humiliate her. And then she told us sometimes, I fall down, and we question her. She faints because she works standing up all day long, and she works from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, or 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, 12 to 14 hours a day, often 7 days a week. She's 11 years old. She's exhausted. She's sick. She's malnourished. So she falls down. She faints. The owner of the factory told us, you only think that she's a child. She's actually a malnourished adult. That's what the company said to us. And this is a big factory, 2,500 workers. There were about 200 kids working in the factory. 11, 12, 13 years of age, 14, 15 kids. And the owner tries to say, oh, they're malnourished adults. Well, Halima, she makes 6.5 cents an hour because she's a child worker. So she's getting about 52 cents a day. She's getting about $3.20 a week. And this is for Walmart. This is for Hanes. We rescued her, and she's in school now. And once in a while you can do that. It's difficult, but sometimes you can just get in there and help her. The family is supportive, and she's in school now, and she wants to be an engineer. Now imagine that. She had very basic education. She had to go to work early because her family was so poor. And by the way, this kid's got guts. She didn't tell her parents that she was being beaten because she didn't want her parents to take her out of that job, because she knew her parents and her other siblings needed that money to survive. So an 11-year-old kid has the guts not to tell her parents that she's being beaten, not to tell her parents that she's fainting, not to tell her parents the way they curse at her. Just how many of us would do that? But she kept working for her family. So we took a couple of the child workers and got them, just paid them so that they could go to school, wouldn't have to work in that filthy factory again. And she's getting terrific grades. And we'll do as much as we can right through. If she can go to a university, if she keeps doing it, we're gonna do it with her. So it's not that they don't have the same potential we do. They're exactly the same as us, except they don't have they're not getting any help at all from their government, not getting help from the companies, not getting help from Walmart or Gap or these other companies. But she's a smart woman, and I think she's going to make it. Let's look at another example of Halima, of Fatima. This next image, this is like a passport photo taken, in the city of Kernaghan in Bangladesh. And if you look at it, you think to yourself, I think to myself, now here's a kid, she's 18 years old, and she's getting her first job. She lived in the countryside, and now she's in the port city in Bangladesh called Kernaghan. 18 years old, and she just like, you look at her and you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to work now. I'm going to help my family. I'm going to send money back to my parents. I'm going to be on my own. I'm in this factory. It must have been scary, but exciting. She's going to be on her own. She's going to be with other people her age. She's going to be working. Her whole life has changed. And so she went into a factory called RL Denim, where they made blue jeans. And this is the story. She was sick. Bangladesh, the water's not very good. It's horrible. Whatever it was, she got terrific dysentery, the runs. Her arms hurt. She had a fever. So her body was aching. She said her arms, her chest, everything was in pain. She had a fever. She begged the factory owner to give her a day off. And when she asked for the day off, he slapped her face. And he said, get back to work. This happened 2 or 3 days. We're not sure. It was either 2 or 3 days. She begged every day, please let me go home. On the second or third day, and every time she asked for the day off, she was slapped. It wasn't just once, it was repeatedly. She was so sick, she laid down on a piece of cardboard next to her sewing machine, and she died in the factory, overworked to death. 18 years old. And now, it was, how filthy it was, is that it was her co-workers that took her to the hospital in a rickshaw. The owner didn't lift his finger to help these people. And she was already dead, but they tried to get her to the hospital to revive her. And so here's a kid working in this factory. She also was a helper. She had to snip off the threads off dungarees. And she was getting 11.5 cents an hour. That was the minimum wage, and since she was an adult, she got paid the minimum wage at the time was 11.5 cents an hour. Well, so, and then you think to yourself, now, we asked her friends and family, we were in Bangladesh, and we asked them, had she ever ridden a bicycle in her life? No. Had she ever gone to a movie in her life? No. Did she watch television? No, we can't afford a television. Does she ever go out to eat? No. Does she play? Basically, no, because they were working from 8 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. She was working 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there was nothing in her life. She couldn't play, couldn't ride a bike, couldn't go to see a movie, never went on vacation. This is wrong. Like something is out of kilter here. It's completely immoral. And when you talk to these workers, you know what they exist on? Since their wages are so low, they eat rice and lentils, which they call dal, smash it up. That's all they eat. A treat for them would be a half an egg, and maybe they could do that twice a month. That's the big treat. Otherwise, rice and lentils, rice and lentils, rice and lentils. Many of the workers are so poor, making clothing for dungarees and making Hanes and Walmart, that they brush their teeth with their finger using ashes from the fire. Because a toothbrush costs 25 cents and toothpaste costs 51 cents, they can't afford it. So imagine that. You can produce clothing for Walmart, but you're going to brush your teeth with your finger. They go to work soaking wet. Bangladesh is very rainy during the monsoon seasons. They can't afford an umbrella, costs $3.37. So you go to work wet, and they wear those long dresses. And you're just soaking wet. You're soaking wet most of the time when you're in the factory during the rainy season. They live in one-room hovels that we can give you some of the tapes and all. We brought some with us just to see the living conditions. You'll have 5 workers, 5 people, maybe a family in one room. And maybe 3 people sleep on a wooden platform with just rags thrown on a platform, no mattress. And some people sleep on the floor. And when it rains at night, the roof leaks. These are dumps. These are slums that you wouldn't even put up furniture. You wouldn't put your lawn furniture in the places that they live. If we showed you a building like that and said, put your lawn chairs in the wintertime, put them in that shed, you'd say, you're nuts. I'm not doing that. The furniture will be destroyed. They live under conditions like that, day in and day out. And when it rains, it leaks. So you can work 14, 15 hours a day for Walmart, but you're going to have to sit up at night when it rains and cover yourself with a piece of plastic because the roof leaks. I mean, if you could go there, if you went to Bangladesh and you met with these women, these workers, it would blow your mind. It would change your life. You just couldn't, you can't stand there and look at someone who's your same age, and this is literally the torture that they're going under. So, and it doesn't have to be this way. I'm going to come back to something else, but I want to explain something. So, we were digging around in a garbage dump in the Dominican Republic, nearby a free trade zone. And we do that because we're looking for research. We're digging around the dumps to see what the companies throw away, because the garbage dump was close to the free trade zone. And we hit pay dirt. We were digging around and we found Nike's internal pricing documents. Now, what they want you to think, when Nike sends a garment like this offshore, this garment was made in the Dominican Republic. Nike wants you to think, oh, well, you know, here we got these garments. We send them to the Dominican Republic. We like them a lot. They got nimble fingers. They're nice people. And you almost think like willy-nilly, they just they put them in the Dominican Republic. They'll sew it when they want to and all this kind of stuff. Doesn't happen like that. This garment goes off with an engineering study. Here's the engineering study for this we tracked it down to this very sweatshirt. You know what Nike does? And every company does this. They break the sewing of this shirt into 22 steps. There are about 6 steps to cut the garment, to cut the fabric. There are 11 steps to sew the shirt. And there are 5 steps to put on the hang tags, the Nike swoosh, and put it on a hanger with a plastic bag. So when you go into the store, it's already ready to be hung up. Everything's done. The hanger's there, the plastic's over it, the labels are there, the prices are there. Do you think Nike breaks those 22 steps, operations, into minutes? No. You know what they do? They break it into 1/100th of a second. They ain't playing games. 1/100th of a second. So every single step, no matter what it is, whether it's the sewing or the packing or it's the cutting, it's broken down into steps of 1/100th of a second. And the bottom of it, when you get to the bottom, here's all of the calculations. When you get to the bottom of this sheet, the workers are given 6.6 minutes to sew the shirt. 6.6 minutes total to sew this children's sweatshirt. 6.6141 seconds. 6.6141 seconds broken into 1/100ths of a second. Well, 6 minutes, 6.6 minutes, 7 minutes, so 11% of an hour. You know what the wage was at that time? The wage in the Dominican Republic was 70 cents. 11% of 70 cents is 8 cents. In other words, the total labor cost for the shirt was 8 cents. This is Nike's own documents. 8 cents. The shirt sells for $22.99. That means that the worker's wages, that 8 cents, is 0.3% of the retail price. 0.3 of 1%. It's not 0.3 of 1%. 8 cents to sew a shirt. It sells for $22.99. That means that the worker's wages amount to 0.3 of 1% of the cost of the garment. Now, what would happen if Nike doubled the wages for the workers? You know, it would be 16 cents. That would be 0.5 of 1% of the retail price. In other words, it doesn't have to be this way. But companies do kill for pennies. I was meeting with an apparel company in New York, and it was in their boardroom, and I was looking around the walls, and they had this original works of art on the walls, a very, very, very high-level company. And it was all modern art, stuff I didn't fully understand. Like, it was one part, there was like a broken piece of an airplane, like, on the wall. And I was like looking at the stuff like a country bumpkin, and the vice president of the company turns to me and says, "We may look rich around here, but we kill for pennies." And that's exactly what goes on in all of these industries. They make their profit penny by penny by penny off the backs of the workers. Now, it doesn't have to be this way. They could raise those wages, and it would have no impact, almost no impact whatsoever on the cost of the garment. And even if they raised the price of the garment by 5 cents, who cares? I mean, most of this stuff is going, you know, for advertising, and it's going to Nike, of course, and it's going to the athletes and so on. But this is just an example. It doesn't have to be this way. Okay, now, a funny thing happened in 2000. There was Burlington Coat Company had a bunch of jackets for sale, and we went in to check them out, and so did some other people. And they were nice jackets with fur collars. And we took a look at the content on the label. And when it came to the fur collars, it said dog fur and cat fur. So that meant in China they were killing dogs and cats for their collars on the jackets. And we told this, a bunch of us went to the media, so did other people. It became a big story, especially in New York City, about the Burlington Coat Company and the dog fur and cat fur being killed in China. And you gotta realize this, our Congress does have a backbone. Our U.S. Congress, the Senate and House. They saw this on television, and all of a sudden the Congress was raging mad. They're not going to allow dogs and cats to be killed in China. Absolutely not, they said. No one's killing the dogs and cats. And congressmen, senators were up there pounding the podium. They were knocking each other out of the way to get to the microphone to denounce China killing dogs and cats. And they said, no one's killing a dog and cat. I can remember every single dog I ever had. I can remember every single dog and how my children played with that dog. They were members of my family. No one's ever going to kill the cats and dogs on our watch. So the Congress passed a bill, the Dog and Cat Fur Act of 2000. And what the bill says is you cannot import dog fur or cat fur to the United States, you can't sell it in the United States, and you can't export it from the United States. So our Congress has a backbone to protect dogs and cats. So we were thinking to ourselves, wait a second, if we can protect dogs and cats, why can't we protect the human being who made it? If we can protect dogs and cats, let's protect the human beings who make the stuff. So we drew up legislation that mirrored the Dog and Cat Act. So what we say in our legislation, we said, you can make garments and any product anywhere in the world you want. We're not protectionistic. Anywhere, bring it in from every single country, Bangladesh, China, anywhere, Pakistan, everywhere, bring it in. But that product can't enter the United States unless the companies adhere to the local labor laws in the country in which they produce. So we're not making up stuff. Whatever the laws are in Bangladesh and whatever the minimum wage in Bangladesh is, that's what it'll be. We're not making wages. That's up to the people in those countries to make the wages. Just you obey the local minimum wage laws in that country and the labor laws in that country. And the only other part of it, the legislation, is that the companies respect the core International Labor Organization, the ILO's internationally recognized worker rights standards, which every company says they adhere to. Every company says, oh, we love the ILO, the International Labor Organization. Of course we love the internationally recognized worker rights standards. No child labor, no forced labor, decent working conditions, freedom of association, right to organize, right to bargain collectively. So the legislation says, bring any product to the United States if you adhere to local labor laws and minimum wage laws, and if you adhere to the ILO standards. Bring it in. If you don't obey those minimum wage laws, or you violate the core ILO labor standards, you're not bringing that product into the United States. You can't import it to the U.S., you can't export it, and you can't sell it in the United States. We introduced this legislation a couple of years ago, way back in the 110th Congress, 2007. We called it the Decent Working Conditions and Fair Competition Act. You know, in the Senate we got 26 co-sponsors, including then Senators Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. In the House we had 175 co-sponsors in the House. In other words, change is possible. We don't have to sit on our backsides. Change is possible. Because you know what? The companies have protections for their labels. They're not stupid. They have intellectual and property right laws which guarantees that their label will be protected. If you make a knockoff of Barbie doll, Mattel's Barbie doll, Mattel sues on average once a month. If another doll comes out and has lips that even look like Barbie doll, they sue that other company and they drive it out of business. If someone makes a knockoff of Nike, if you capture that person, if they're making knockoffs in China, if you capture that person's going to jail. They'll never work again. You'll raid your bank account. You'll be hit with heavy fines. So the companies tell us we need a level playing field in the global economy. We have to have our swoosh protected. Mickey Mouse has to be protected. Barbie doll has to be protected. If it wasn't, there would be complete chaos and a race to the bottom. So we agree with that. We say you do need a level playing field in the global economy. But can't we have similar laws to protect the rights of the human being who made Barbie doll? The 6-year-old girl in Indonesia who made Barbie doll. Can't we also protect her rights? You know what the companies say? No, that would be an impediment to free trade. What we're talking about here is we need a shift. Sometimes, you know, you do the same thing over and over again. You just get used to it. This is how life is. This is just what life is. And we don't stand back to think, it doesn't have to be this way. If the Barbie doll can be protected, we sure as heck can protect the 6-year-old girls who make Barbie doll. That shouldn't be so difficult. So I think you people, the future's in your hands. I'll admit we've screwed things up very badly. And we leave you with an economy that's in pretty bad shape, desperate shape. I want to show one more thing this will be like a 1 minute. Workers in Bangladesh struggling for a wage increase. And watch what happens when they ask for a wage increase against Walmart and Gap and the other companies. There's 3.5 million garment workers in Bangladesh. 3.5 million. 80% of them are young women, younger than you, or they're your age. They were asking for a wage increase. Their wages were 11.5 cents an hour, and the owners came back and said, okay, we'll give you 14 cents an hour. And the workers went out on the street saying, we can't live on 14 cents an hour. We're asking for 35 cents an hour. Now, who couldn't pay 35 cents an hour? But the companies refused, and the government refused, and the garment owners refused. And just to show you a tiny example, we went to Bangladesh, and we took an ad out in a newspaper. I don't know what I did with the thing. It's over here. We took an ad out, cost us about $2,500 to take a full-page ad out in the newspaper in Bangladesh. And of course, it's in Bengali. And we said on the part of the American people, we said there's no company in the world that couldn't pay 35 cents an hour. No corporation, it's impossible. And we stand in solidarity with the workers in Bangladesh. They deserve 21 cents an hour, deserve the 35 cents an hour. It turned out nobody had ever made an ad like this in a newspaper before. No Western unions or solidarity groups like ours. Nobody had ever stood in solidarity with the people of Bangladesh. This one newspaper ad, which cost us like $2,500, this one ad led to enormous publicity. The day after we made sure we were out of the country when the ad was placed, because we knew they would try to capture us. But we left, and then the very day we were leaving, it was in the newspaper the next day. After our ad came out in the newspaper, this issue dominated all of the media in Bangladesh, the television stations, the prime minister. Everybody had to be talking about this wage increase. And what the unions told us when we went back to Bangladesh this last November, they said to us, the government had settled on a 17-cent an hour wage, but because of your ad, they're going to give us 21 cents an hour. Now, it seems like nothing. 4 cents an hour is apparently nothing. It seems like nothing. But you know what? There are 3.5 million garment workers in Bangladesh. That 4 cent an hour increase is just 32 cents a day times 8 hours, 4 cents, 32 cents a day, $1.92 a week, about $100 a month. Take $100 a month and multiply it by 3.5 million workers. And in one single year, that 4 cents amounts to $350 million going into the pockets of the workers rather than the owners keeping it. And I'm only doing this to say, don't let anybody tell you that you can't make change. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't have an impact. That's a lot of baloney. You can have an impact, and you can make a difference in people's lives. And so I'm going to end there. I just thank, went on maybe too long. But I think that you're having this week of events. It really does matter. And it doesn't take the whole university to move. It's always small groups that actually start organizing against sweatshops and other issues. And I just think the future's in your hands. You've got the power. This isn't a good period in our history, but you do have the power to make change, and you do have the power to be the voice of the voiceless workers who never, ever get a chance to talk to people in the U.S. We're the largest market in the world. We're still the largest economy in the world. But those workers don't have a voice. You can be the voice of those voiceless workers. And when USAS comes tomorrow, United Students Against Sweatshops, they've done some really good work. And I would just encourage you to come to the meeting with USAS because, frankly, they're doing terrific work. And they need people like you. They need people like this university. And anyway, well, thank you very much. And it was really an honor to come here.
We have time for questions and a wireless microphone somewhere. On a chair. So, are there any questions about anything that was said, relevant, anything, any of this, United States, sweatshop? Now's your chance. Great for participation. Hello?
You were talking about the minimum wage in the other countries. Does all those countries that you were talking about, do they all have national minimum wages? And, like around what? Like what's the difference between like Bangladesh's minimum wage and what someone like Nike would be paying the workers?
Well, it's in China right now, the minimum wage is about 80 cents an hour. And that's even in high-tech auto factories. We just did a report on Ford where the worker had all his fingers torn off, 3 of his fingers torn off because they shut the safety gear off on the stamping machines that make the parts. But about 80 cents an hour in China, maybe about 26 cents to maybe 40 cents in Vietnam. I mean, it varies from country to country, obviously. But the wages are extremely low. I mean, Mexico, 50 cents, 54 cents an hour. I mean, the wages are very low all across the world. You know, I'm talking about the developing world. So it varies, but the cost of living varies in those countries. I mean, it's India, maybe 56 cents an hour. I mean, the wages in the developing world are very, very low. And they compete on the low wages. You know, Bangladesh is the 3rd largest exporter of apparel to the United States. The largest exporter is China. 2nd is Vietnam. 3rd is Bangladesh, and 4th is Honduras. All low-wage countries. And, for example, NFL garments that were being made in Honduras, where the workers were earning, with benefits and stuff, they were earning about $1.04 in Honduras to make NFL garments. And the NFL didn't want to pay that. So they moved it to Nicaragua, where the wage is 68 cents an hour. The shirts sell for $100 a piece, these jerseys. but $1.04 is too much for the NFL to pay. So this is a race to the bottom. And again, it doesn't have to be that way, but we're the only ones who are going to be able to stop it as consumers.
Hi. This might seem like a broad question, but how did you start becoming involved in these kind of like humanitarian projects? And like how would you be able, like how would a college student be able to get involved with such big projects? You know, like it is kind of, it feels like it's challenging.
Well, it's for I mean, just a personal story. It's just a lot of the stuff you do, you have no idea you're going to do it. I love art, and I love photography. And whenever I had enough money, I would just go to my dark room, and I wouldn't leave my apartment for 6 months. You know, I wouldn't go travel much except if I was photographing. And when I ran out of money, I did construction work. But then there was a peace march in Central America. This is back during Reagan's wars in the mid-'80s, which is long before you guys. But a religious person wanted to do a peace march to Central America because they were killing the workers, killing and raping nuns, killing the Jesuits and whatnot. And I went on this peace march in Central America. And you can read about stuff in the book, but until you go, you can't believe it. When I saw people getting killed and shot, and Barbara did the exact same thing, and we met there in Central America as being part of this movement in Central America, and it just changes your life. From that point forward, we couldn't do anything else but solidarity work. Like once you saw, I mean, literally, there was a union called Astel, a telecommunication workers union in El Salvador, and they assassinated 6 young workers because they didn't like the union. The thugs did this. They murdered the Jesuit priests, six priests murdered at the UCA campus in San Salvador. Thousands of people were tortured. We let our guards now once in a while. I went into a television station in El Salvador for an interview, and they said it was going to be an interview with actually the person who's the president of El Salvador now, and he was running a television station. And we got there very early in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. I was sort of out of it. And I'm standing there, and it turns out I'm going to debate the head of the apparel industry, who's a death squad killer, who's educated at Harvard, by the way. But so I'm standing there, and a producer comes over to me, and he says, you know, I said to him, I'd like a cup of coffee. And he says to me, what, are you nervous? You scared? And I thought, this guy's a bit nutty. And he said, I just want the coffee. So I went into the bathroom, came out, he gave me the coffee, I drank it, and they had put a drug in it. So I lost my mind in the middle of the interview on television with this death squad killer guy. And we learned then, you got to keep your guard up constantly. You know, like, stuff goes on, and so we had tons of stuff like that happen. You know, and eventually you get used to it, and eventually you protect yourself more. Now, the sad part is, I believe if there was any funding, I believe a lot of students, I believe a lot of you would love to dedicate your life to social justice, but they make it impossible to raise money. We had to leave New York City because we ran out of money. We went to Pittsburgh, and we're getting some help from the United Steelworkers Union. But, like, in other words, it's so hard to get money to do social justice issues. I believe if there was any way to free up some money, I believe a lot of college students would love to devote their lives to social justice issues. And you could make a difference. There is no doubt in my mind that you can make a difference. And they'll hold you back by not giving you the funding. So this is a big problem for us. We've done this work for 25 years, and we've taken on the biggest companies in the world. We're still 3 people. We cannot get any money to grow. We were almost going to show this. I'm not going to tell you what country it was, but there was a woman sitting under a veil, under a cloth, so you can't see her face, and she's talking. And she was from Sri Lanka, but it wasn't the country of Sri Lanka. She was a guest worker who went to another country. And we saw the tape. They snuck it out. They gave it to us, this tape. We were in the Middle East. They gave it to us. And the woman's talking in Sinhalese. We don't obviously understand it. We had it translated on a Friday morning, and Barbara and I just about dropped dead. The woman said that she worked in this factory, and the manager of the factory, these are all young Sri Lankan women, he raped them. As a serial rapist, not only were they working 14 hours a day, but he was raping these young women. And he would torture them. He'd say, look, if you don't love me, you're going to work 14 hours a day. If you don't love me, your wages are going to get cut. If you don't love me, you're going to get slapped and hit, and we're going to hurl the garments in your face. And he just went after these women, and after these women, and after these women, until they finally just collapsed. And the saddest thing was the woman said in the tape, she made the tape just begging and hoping that someone would help them. She said, going home to my country, Sri Lanka, they're poor, they live in a one-room house. And she says, I cannot even take my clothes off in front of my mother because this man bit my body all over my whole body, and it's all scarred. This is going on every single day. Every single day. And it sounds miserable to say this, but it's only countries that have power, like the United States, we're the biggest market in the world, we're the largest economy in the world. It's only when people in the first world fight back that we can help help our brothers and sisters in the developing world. I mean, who gives a crap about Bangladesh? You ever hear anybody say a word to you about Bangladesh? I mean, in other words, they're the bravest people in the world, but if we don't give them a hand, they're going nowhere. China, in my mind, you got revolutions going on all across North Africa and the Middle East. In China, workers still don't know what a union is. We're 100 years after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, workers in China do not know what a union is. They have no idea what it is and how it can help them because it's so repressive. And the more repression that builds up around the world, we're going to go down too. I mean, believe me, if they can keep crushing wages down in the United States, they're going to do it. If they can destroy the unions in the United States, they're going to do it. So, I mean, we have to fight back for ourselves.
So you talked a lot about people having power, students having power. I was thinking about the difficulty that you also talked about, though, about not being able to find products, especially clothing, that's made at a living wage. I know I have looked, and when you find it, it's comparatively very expensive. American-made clothing, in comparison, very high, what one would consider high cost. Mm-hmm. And I'm also not sure that taking a stand by buying or not buying a single sweater is going to have some magic ripple effect. So I have two questions. One, what does an individual consumer do when they're seeking clothing in this sort of small side, situation? But I would imagine that the solution is more about bonding together with groups of people to take a stand to say, no, this isn't acceptable. And how can one do that when one is wearing, you're going to your protest march wearing a T-shirt that was produced in these conditions? So I'm kind of trying to figure out how you balance in your individual life, but how you join up with others.
Well, I'm not a historian, but I know there are some historians here, and they can tell all of us every single change in the United States, every single progressive change has come through legislation or social movements. So, for example, I don't believe you can shop your way out of the global sweatshop economy. When I see locally made goods, we go out of our way to go to the farmer's market. We'll do everything we can, because also we want to survive, not be poisoned to death. But we go out of our way to buy local goods, foods, find something made in the United States or Canada, we go nuts. We found some fleece vests made in Canada and gobbled up a bunch of them. But that's not going to change the global economy. The global economy will only change through social action or social movements or legislation. And as a matter of fact, in the history of the United States, there have been no progressive changes that haven't occurred like that. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was the perfect example. The death of those 146 women galvanized the labor movement, and people who cared, social justice people and women's groups and everything. And it was that movement, that galvanization, that led to the legislation that then started to lift up America and lift up all of us as workers. So that's why we put a lot of stake in this legislation. And we did a Harris poll. 79% of the people in the country agree with our legislation. So what's stopping us? In other words, we just need that popular movement to push it through. So, they have us divided. And they have us, at any rate, I agree with you. You can't shop your way out of the global sweatshop economy. If you can find something, that's made in a, like USAS is doing that kind of stuff. They've pushed a number of companies to make clothing under humane conditions, whether it's the Dominican Republic or whether it's Los Angeles. So that's very important, but that's not going to change Walmart. We need legislation. The civil rights movement was so good, not just for people of color, but the civil rights movement, what impact it had way beyond the point of ending this miserable discrimination and torture. It also led to incredible growth of unions. The UAW, United Auto Workers, had its best days during the civil rights movement. And we've said to the unions over and over again, and to labor, we're only as strong as we are as a movement. And if we leave people behind, they're going to turn on us. Why should someone leap up and down that we have a pension or we have health care if they don't have it? They'd have to be idiots to do that. So we as people in the labor movement, we must take everyone with us. We have to try. We can't just be doing it ourselves. But anyway, I think the legislation, I don't know what it's going to take, but we're going to try to go back again to the religious organizations, to students, to the unions. I mean, if we could do one thing in our lifetime, it would be to push this legislation. So, to us, it's an answer.
Other questions?
Hi. One of the things you said that after the Dog and Cat Act that none of the dog and cat fur will be imported, and then you went over to Congress and then you said, well, what about humans in other countries? So, and you only said 26 people signed it, correct?
In the Senate. And
why did only those amount of people sign it? Because I mean, you had big people sign it. You had Clinton, you had Barack, you had like really high people understand that. So I would definitely think you would definitely state your case well. So if they would sign that act, why wouldn't they sign yours?
Well, what happens is, well, frankly, most of the Republicans wouldn't vote for it. So we didn't reach a voting level that we could pass it in the House or the Senate. And as an aside, Barack Obama was a very late comer. It took a lot of pressure to get him to sign. A lot of people, in other words, they get a lot of corporate donations. And this thing is still radical for them, even though all we're saying is you have to obey the local labor laws in which you produce, and you have to buy the core ILO labor standards, because the whole world says they respect those labor standards. But what we're talking about is such an earth-changing shift that they're frightened to death. And it's going to take, now we understand, the legislation was written by some very famous professors who were afraid to attach their name to it, because we wanted to make sure our law met all the standards, WTO standards, all the US standards. We made sure this law was ironclad. So we did all of our work. We came up with the idea. We came up with the dog and cat fur angle and everything. We had everything in place. And then we went to the House and the Senate, and the United Steelworkers Union was out front on this. And we met with members of Congress, and we did testimonies and all that kind of stuff. And that's a lot of co-sponsors. I mean, 175 in the House is a lot. Even 26 in the Senate's a lot. But we came nowhere close being able to pass it. And now we understand we ain't going anywhere unless we have the students with us on this. And we're not going anywhere if we don't have the religious organizations with us. And we're not going anywhere if we don't have other unions with us. And one highlight, one point of how this stuff works. For some odd reason, I got invited to the International Firefighters Association, International Association of Firefighters. In other words, the Firefighters Union, internationally, New York, United States, and Canada. And I went out to their convention in San Diego. 5,000 firefighters were there. And basically, firefighters, they're really pretty much the vast majority are Republican in voters and stuff like that. And I gave this talk about these women and stuff like that. And the firefighters came back and they said, we want to join with you to work together. There are a lot of decent Republicans and decent Democrats and everybody. But these firefighters, they don't want these kids being crushed and stepped on and treated like animals. So you can't get more mainstream than many of these firefighters. They want to be part of the work. And as a matter of fact, after 9/11 in New York, when 353 firefighters were killed, their logo became very famous. So they got royalties now. If you see a sweatshirt with the association, International Association of Firefighters on their sweatshirt, the union's getting royalties for that, as they deserve. But you know what? A lot of the stuff was made in a sweatshop. They never thought to themselves, wait a second, we're getting royalties, but we have to have it made in a, and now they do. They're on fire now to change that. They'll never again put the stuff in a sweatshop. Never one step ever again. And we're getting calls from firefighters all across the country. So I believe the American people are really decent. I think, decency in this country is enormous. But we just have to reach people. The media doesn't want to help too much. So again, it's just, you're going to get there through hard work and through a social movement. And, on the internet, young people like you could send this stuff out. We'll give you the videos. You could send this stuff out all over the world and get other people involved. And USAS is right there to help and stuff. So,
Other questions?
yeah, listserv. People should sign up for listserv too, yeah.
I got the first word, and I'm going to take the last word in the form of a question. You just talked about what the firefighters have done once they realize that what they're wearing and selling are made in sweatshops. And I'm wondering if you could comment on what university students have done, what people could hear about tomorrow with regard to the logos and the university bookstores and things of that sort.
In the colleges, and it started, the anti-sweatshop movement actually started at the University of Wisconsin, in Madison, and at Ann Arbor. And the students, and it spread to colleges all across the country. And we went and gave many talks at the universities. In fact, we brought workers from Bangladesh and elsewhere, Central America, to go on tour. And the students were absolutely unbelievable. They would get up early in the morning and they would chalk up the sidewalks on their campus that there's going to be a sweatshop event that evening. Every single side, you couldn't move. They went into the classrooms ahead of time and posted all this stuff in every single classroom. Big meetings going to be held on anti-sweatshop stuff. They mobilized themselves. They did the whole thing themselves, the students. And they could bring out thousands and thousands of people to these rallies and stuff. We had a thing we did in New York City. We called it the Holiday Season of Conscience. So right before the Christmas holidays and right before Hanukkah, we had a march down Fifth Avenue with high school students. You know, one of those years we had about 3,000 high school students and about, 5,000 people marched with us. And I'll tell you what the students did. The students themselves went out and bought prison uniforms with stripes on it. And we started the march on 57th Street in front of Nike. And the high school students with the prison uniforms laid down on the ground in front of Nike, and they had other students dressed up with top hats, and they were whipping the students and kicking them and everything like that. Biggest nightmare for Nike in the world is to have high school students doing this with 5,000 people there, and they're doing this in front of Nike. And then we marched down Fifth Avenue, and we sent some young high school students into the police to get a permit so we could have a rally in front of the big Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. Nobody gets permits to demonstrate at Rockefeller Center except young high school students who look great. So the young high school students went in, got the permit, and sure enough, we showed up with all of our people. So high school students were mobilizing, but the real stuff went on in Wisconsin, and it spread like crazy to Michigan, Notre Dame. And for example, Notre Dame was one of the first schools that said they would not allow sweatshop goods to come into their college. And then the students came up with the idea, and we worked with them and came up with the idea with them, that you need a full disclosure. You can never again send a garment to a university unless you know what factory that garment was made in. Because up to that point, all of the companies said, you know, you don't need to know that. Just trust us. We have a code of conduct. We treat the people very nicely, and they get paid really nicely. We can't tell you where the factories are, because if we told you where the factories are, we would lose our best factories. And other companies would steal our good factories. Of course, it was all baloney. They wanted to hide where they make the goods. But the students won one of the biggest victories by saying, okay, the hell with you. If you don't tell us what factory you're making it in, you ain't bringing it into our school. That's incredible. I remember talking to Nike, saying, if you're not afraid of what you're doing, if you're proud of what you're doing, if you're proud of your factories, just give us the name, full public disclosure. If you're not abusing workers, why do you have to hide the factory? And Nike actually said back to me, oh, you don't understand a thing. If you understood how the apparel industry operated, if we gave away the names and addresses of our factories, we'd have to go out of business tomorrow. You heard this thing for years. Guess who stopped it? The students. The students themselves stopped it. You cannot, there's probably about 163 universities across this country who you can't bring a garment into their stores, into their college university stores, unless you disclose the name and address of the factory. Then the students formed the Worker Rights Consortium, which will monitor to guarantee, now that they have the names and addresses of those factories, they can monitor those factories to guarantee that the workers aren't being abused. So the students actually, frankly, made one of the biggest contributions to this anti-sweatshop struggle. And, you know, they need help to keep this movement going. But what they did was phenomenal. And it would be unbelievable if you started a USAS. I don't know if you have it here, but if you started a USAS chapter here, it'd be fantastic. I mean, you have your chance tomorrow. The USAS person's going to be here. And we can describe in much, much greater detail. But they are a heck of an organization. And they ain't phonies. They actually deliver stuff. And they just won a huge back wage increase for workers in the Dominican Republic and in Honduras because they were cheated of their wages. I'm talking about millions of dollars settlements. So this would be an avenue for you if you wanted to be part of that. They're going to be here tomorrow.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
All of you for spending an afternoon here. I hope you learned something. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for staying. That's like an hour and 40 minutes or something. That's pretty admirable.
Handout in the back, video out in.